Hi everyone, I'm Eric from the book blog lonesomereader.com, and this is my August reading wrap-up, part one of it, of the books that I've read so far in August. But first I want to talk about a very special event I did at the very beginning of August, where I got the chance to interview Zadie Smith in front of a large group of people at a special preview event for her new novel called Swing Time. Which isn't actually going to be published until November by Hamish Hamilton. But this was a special preview event for media and journalists and booksellers. And so I got to interview Zadie Smith, which was fantastic. And I was really nervous about it because it's the first proper book event that I've ever done, the first interview I've ever done with an author, and it was Zadie Smith, this incredibly famous, well-regarded author. So I was very nervous about it, but I'm relieved to say it went fantastically well. We seemed to get along really well, and the questions went down well, and the audience seemed really engaged and interested. So I was really happy with how it went. Really bizarrely, most of the pictures from the event that I've seen show a lot of the audience and Zadie laughing. I don't remember being so funny, but I guess everybody was having a good time. So, and I can assure you they weren't laughing at me. So that's all good. So I really encourage you to read Swing Time when it comes out in November. It is a great book, and I had the enormous privilege of being one of the first people outside of the publishers in the UK to read the book. So that was a great honor, and it is a really engaging and fantastic novel all about friendship and attitudes towards race and changing societal developments politically, economically, and socially over a period of a few decades from the 80s into the 2000s. Yeah, just really fantastic fun read. So really recommend. Now, a book I read this month, actually I reread it because I first read it at university, but then I reread this new edition of Good Morning Midnight by Rhys. And I read it because I'm co-organizing a Rhys reading week in September. That's going to take place from September 12th to the 18th. And it's the first time I've ever done anything like this before, but me and another book blogger named Jackie are going to be co-hosting this event where we'll be discussing all of Rhys's books on our blogs and also on Goodreads and on Twitter. And so it'd be fantastic if you want to join in reading this great author. A lot of you will probably know Rhys from her amazing novel Wide Sargasso Sea, which is a sequel, or you could say a prequel, to Jane Eyre. But she also wrote a number of really interesting novels throughout the 1930s. And then, interestingly, she stopped publishing any books until the 60s when Wide Sargasso Sea was published. And this novel, Good Morning Midnight, was written at the end of that first cycle of books in the 30s. And it's a really dark novel about a woman in Paris who's very depressed and suicidal and drinks a lot and goes out with a lot of men. And it's a really penetrating insight into her life, into depression, and is a really fascinating novel. But I'm going to be talking about Rhys a lot more in September, so that's all I'm going to say about it for now. But yes, please join in. We're using the hashtag on Twitter, Reading Rhys. And it was a nice coincidence that this new edition of Good Morning Midnight was coming out in the Pocket Penguins edition. So that's a nice coincidence because before we started planning the week, we didn't know that this was coming out. So I'm going to be doing an interview with the series editor at Penguin about this novel and why they chose it to be part of their series. And so that'll be on my blog in September. And we have a bunch of other great events that we're planning around the week. So if you've ever been interested in reading Rhys, it would be great if you could join in. Now, after the Booker Prize long list announcement for this year, I wanted to pick a book, sort of like a potluck of one that I knew nothing about, that was totally fresh to me and I'd never heard of before the Booker Prize list. So I decided to pick the novel The Many by Will Menmuir that was published by Salt Publishing. It turned out to be a short, highly atmospheric and creepy novel about a small fishing village whose waters have become polluted. The narrative alternates between an older, unpopular fisherman and a man named Timothy who moves into a house which has been unoccupied for a long time, ever since its much beloved owner disappeared. And there's a mystery about what's happening in this village, which is only revealed at the end, and I won't give anything away because I don't want to give any spoilers. But when I got to that part, I was totally gripped. So it's a novel that I felt a bit bewildered by, and I just wasn't sure what was going on or what was happening, although it was really intriguing. But then when it gets to the end, it is so gripping and moving. It's not just like a thriller, but it has a really emotionally impactful story. It reminded me in some senses of the suspense in Henry James's novel The Turn of the Screw, or the very somber tone of Ernest Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea. But it's a really interesting short novel, so if you want to pick a book from the Booker Prize to give a try, I would recommend this book. Next I read Sarah Taylor's novel The Lauras. This was published by William Heinemann. Now, last year I loved reading Sarah Taylor's debut novel, The Shore, which is a fantastic family saga which takes place over many years, and it was longlisted for the Bailey's Prize for Fiction. The Lauras is a more concentrated novel from the perspective of an adolescent named Alex, whose physical features are ambivalent, so Alex can pass as a boy or a girl. So Alex actually chooses to live without a gender. The story follows Alex and Alex's mother as they spontaneously leave their house one night when the mother gets into a big fight with Alex's father. They drive across the country where Alex's mother revisits people from her past, and Alex forms a lot of new connections. There's emotional encounters, violence, and family drama. It's a really moving, intelligently composed novel about the meaning of home and asserting your independence for who you want to be. I absolutely loved reading this novel, and I think Sarah Taylor is a very talented writer. Next, I read this novel, Infinite Ground, by Martin McInnes. This is another debut novel, and it was published by Atlantic Books. This is a really intriguing novel. A man named Carlos goes missing, and an investigator takes the job to find him. What seems at first like an unsettling caper story turns into a bizarre existential quest. Things aren't quite what they seem, so a company hires people to impersonate productive employees, and people who live in a remote forest dress up as natives for the tourists. So it's quite a strange and disorientating novel in some ways, but I think McInnes's writing has a real beautiful fluidity to it that carries you through its narrator's adventures. I think this is a really daring and intelligent novel, but I wouldn't recommend it if you're looking for a straightforward story, but I think it's a really promising and interesting debut. And also I think it should be noted that it has an extremely beautiful cover. I mean, look at the shine and the design of the cover. I'm a real sucker for great covers. And next I read The Arab of the Future by Riyad Sattouf, and this was published by Two Roads. It's actually the first book in a trilogy. Now, I don't read many graphic books, but I was so intrigued by the sound of this memoir that I had to pick it up, and I was so glad I did it because it's a really moving and interesting story. It recounts Riyad's experiences as a young child with his Syrian father and his French mother. They live variously in France and in Libya in the early 80s when it was under the rule of Gaddafi, and also under Hafez al-Assad in Syria a few years later. It's fascinating how he contrasts writing about these distinct societies under different forms of rulership, how the reigning ideologies of their leaders and religious cultures impact the attitudes and social conditions of these different countries. It's also a beautiful family portrait with a lot of humor and emotion. There's a lot of great sections and drawings to show the interactions between the young boy and other young people he meets in these different countries, and his different meetings with family members, some of whom are really eccentric and interesting. So like I said, this is only the first part in the trilogy, and the second part is actually being published in September in the UK. So I really recommend that you read this first book before that. And finally, I read this novel, Harmless Like You, by Rowan Hisayu Buchanan. Hisayu? Not too sure. But this is published by Scepter Books, and it's another novel with a great cover. Look at how good and striking that is. I love that. So this is another debut novel, and it follows a very shy, introverted girl named Yuki, and it starts in 1969. She's lived all of her life in New York City, but her parents are of Japanese descent. When her parents move to Japan, Yuki decides to stay in New York, living with her only friend, Odile, and Odile's mother, who is a romance writer, who ironically has a disastrous love life herself. Buchanan writes beautifully and intelligently about Yuki's developing artistic sensibility and how, for her, colors are imbued with emotion. She also writes movingly about her intense sense of isolation from other people. The story also leaps forward in some sections to 2016 and follows a man named Jay, who is trying to track down his estranged mother Yuki, who now lives in Germany. So this is a really sophisticated and an imaginative novel that deals really sensitively with issues of like self-esteem and family relations, and I found it a really personally moving book. So those are the books that I've read so far in August, but let me know. I'd really be interested if you've read any of them yourself, or if you're interested in reading any of them, or just what you've been reading otherwise. So please comment below, and if you enjoy hearing what I have to say about books, please subscribe to my channel. So thank you very much for watching.